Everyone to our Sustainability Roundtable seminar today, November 20th, 2020. And what we'll do is typically we keep the chat open and I kind of monitor the chat. If people have questions, they can type it into the chat. Or at the end, if you want to turn on your speaker and or video to ask a question, that's fine too. We're a pretty small group. And we record this for folks that can't make it, especially for students that have to work and are enrolled in the seminar class. So thank you for allowing us to record this for them. And today I wanted to introduce our speaker. We're so excited to have Shauntrice Martin. She is the founder of Feed the West Initiative, and it's a community food justice initiative that is sponsored by Change Today, Change Tomorrow. And so what I'm going to do is open up my chat and bow out to give Ms. Shauntrice the floor.
All right, so hello, I'm really excited to be here. A lot of people already know some of this, but I started at the beginning just because I never know where people are kind of coming in with information. So I started Feed the West with Taylor Ryan, who is the executive director of Change Today, Change Tomorrow. We were passing out food as we usually do. We pass out free food for folks who are unhoused, folks who just don't have enough money for groceries. We were also, during the uprisings, passing out food for protesters. A lot of them were out all day when it was really hot back in the summer and didn't have water or snacks. So we would have granola bars and nutrition shakes, those sorts of things, as well as masks and gloves and all the COVID safe materials. Eventually, we even had a temperature check machine just to help folks out. So when David McAtee was killed by law enforcement, we were out passing out food. It was just business as usual. And the protests for the police to remove his body from the street was peaceful. It was actually, sort of like how you would imagine a church revival. There were children dancing. There were people singing. There was prayer. We were trying to have a very positive, very peaceful demonstration and celebration of life to juxtapose against the way the police were treating David McAtee, because he was a loved member of the community here in the West End. So as a result, Kroger ended up closing their West Broadway location. At the time when we asked, they said it was closed indefinitely. So we had elders coming on public transportation to go shopping. We had employees coming to work their shifts, only to be met with doors and no explanation. So Taylor and I worked to get people rides back home. We worked to get people food, and we that night came up with the plan for Feed the West. Initially, we thought it would maybe be 20 or so, a few dozen people asking for groceries. We made a form to request groceries, a form to get donations, and a form to accept volunteers. So we did a bunch of planning, maybe went to bed at 2, 3 in the morning. And then when we woke up the next day around 8 or 9, we thought we had been spammed because there were just so many inquiries. We had hundreds of people asking for groceries. We had over 900 people who wanted to volunteer. We had, I think in that first day, maybe $10,000 donated. It feels like forever ago, even though it was just back in June. But we were overwhelmed in a really great way with the response. So we started immediately. I have a friend from college, Greg, who offered his place. Because of COVID, they were shut down. So he offered his place for us to do the initial Feed the West distribution. We also worked with the Boys and Girls Club. And we just had, at our height, maybe 25 locations operating each day for drop-offs, for distribution, for packing, those sorts of things. And we ended up working with the University of Louisville medical school students at SNMA to get some more COVID-safe literature. So they created brochures for us. We had recipe cards for the vegetables and things like that. We've been able to work with about a dozen farmers, Black farmers around Kentucky. So we try to keep it as local as possible. And from all that, we ended up, I think to date, we have served, I want to say 31,000, I know over 30,000, but around 31,000 West End residents with free groceries. Each bag has at least $85 worth of groceries in it. And we do source locally. So we have Black farmers around Kentucky. We have Health Daddy Wow. We have we're working with Wells Made Co., which makes specialty nut butters. Reevesville Farm, a phonograph farm in Reevesville, has our organic eggs. So we try as much as possible to keep the dollar circulating with those who have been franchised. So yeah, I know that's a whole lot. So I just want to pause for a moment. I cannot see the chat, so I just want to pause and make sure people are like able to digest that information. I know it's a lot. But I just like to do that intro before I get into the seminar. So where we are now, as I mentioned, we served over 31,000 people. We've had partnerships with lots of folks around the state. And so the next phase, because people were asking, well, what is going to happen next? Feed the West initially was supposed to be a temporary program over the weekend when Kroger was closed that weekend. And as you see, it's been going a few months strong now. We've been going since June 2nd, and we're still doing deliveries almost every day. And we have a partnership with Trader Joe's. So we are figuring out what is the next step for Feed the West and for the organization, because Change Today, Change Tomorrow has about a dozen programs outside of Feed the West. We do Emoji Day, which was yesterday, where we give food and hygiene kits to those who are unhoused. We have an NTI program. We have a bunch of partnerships. 93 Nights is another partnership we have where we do mentoring for young boys. And so with all these things going on, we've been thinking, like, what is the next step? What can we do to continue to fight against the food apartheid without like us all losing our minds? Because at the end of the day, there's only about 5 staff, and I'm not actually one of them. I'm a volunteer. With Change Today, Change Tomorrow, and Feed the West. And so Black Market came about. We did a bunch of research on food justice and the food apartheid here in the West End specifically. And what we found from a lot of elders and families who've been in the West End for decades is that there were Black grocery stores before. But the issue was they got priced out. So they may have been leasing a building for the grocery store, but through gentrification and displacement, they were priced out and couldn't afford to stay. We also have a lot of food marts and corner stores, but because they're so small, they're not able to buy in bulk and remain sustainable. And so you'll see a lot of our corner store entrepreneurs buying their grocery from Kroger's, which means they are paying the same price that we as your average customer pays, which means they have to mark it up even more to make even the tiniest profit. And grocery store margins are already razor thin. I just published today our projections for Black Friday. We're going to spend a lot, but not make a lot. And if everything goes perfectly, we'll make a profit of about $800. We all know that everything's not going to go perfectly with the first day of the soft opening. And so a lot of small businesses don't have any cushion. And so we were looking at that. We looked at Black Wall Street in Louisville, which was Walnut Street. It was a corridor with a bunch of Black-owned businesses. We looked over the years to contribute to the food apartheid and to make it so that like there aren't many options. If you look at the health equity report from 2017 from Louisville Metro, it shows that there are a lot of health disparities. One of the really shocking ones is that people in the West End tend to live about a decade shorter than people in the East End and your St. Matthews area. And this is not just about food. There are a lot of contributing factors, but food is one of the ones that has been prevalent, and it's one that we can actually change. Many of you have probably heard about Louisville Metro giving $3.5 million for a food justice program. Initially, that was meant for the Louisville Community Grocery Co-op, and you'll even see that wording in the initial proposal. And so people ask, is Black Market going to go for that? We're not. But the point is that food justice is trending for some reason this year, probably due to COVID and the lack of access that people have faced universally this year. People are finally paying attention to the disparities in low income and diverse communities. And so we've been able to open people's eyes up. They're a little more willing to talk about food justice and take action against the food apartheid. And so, and just to back up a little bit, a lot of people use the wording food desert. We specifically focus on the wording of food apartheid. And the reason is when you think about the metaphor of a desert, you think about a naturally occurring thing where there just happens to be a lack of access. But it's not it's not that simple. Really, when it comes to food justice, and you're talking about the food apartheid, this is something that is a structural part of these institutions, right? The Kroger in the West End does not have as many organic options, and sometimes they have no organic options in the produce section. We visited Kroger dozens of times over the last few months, and the West End location that we visited most never had okra, never had bok choy, never had these premium vegetables. And if they did have any not great vegetables, it would not be organic, or it would be rotting or wilted, things that would be thrown away at some of their East End locations. And you also have a very heavy police presence in both West End Kroger locations. You don't have the updated materials. The often treated differently at the West End Kroger locations compared to East End Kroger locations. And we've talked to the unions and things like that to just kind of get an unbiased look, because obviously we're biased, right? We have been subjected to those practices for decades. And so in order to make it a little more objective, we've reached out to a bunch of different organizations. Root Cause Research Center is another one that we've consulted to find out, what are the hard stats? And so when we talk about a food apartheid, it's because there are racist undertones to a lot of those practices. Some of these institutions don't consider the West End as being valuable enough to invest in. Where they may invest $1 million into the Kroger locations in the West End, they're investing $5 to $10 million in other locations. You'll also see that some of the managers from Kroger in the West End don't get paid as much, even though they're doing the same hours, have the same qualifications. The West End Kroger managers are not allowed to dictate what comes into the market. So for instance, if they get 1,000 people asking for okra one month, they can't then turn around to corporate and say, hey, people really want okra, or hey, people really don't want this other thing. They don't have that autonomy as managers. But alternatively, many of the managers in some of the East End locations have that option. And if you all remember, some of you may be too young, but there used to be a Kroger at the 2nd Street location. That's when I was living in the Shepherd Square housing project. So that was the closest grocery store, and it was not walking distance. And across maybe like a half a mile or so from Shepherd Square housing projects was also the Clarksdale housing projects. It's being torn down, or it's been torn down now. There's mixed income housing. But those two very low income areas, people on EBT, had food stamps and things like that, had no walking distance Kroger. And even the one that if you caught a bus or two, you could catch the Broadway bus and then have to walk a little bit, maybe walk like a half mile, or catch the Broadway bus and then the 2nd Street bus to transfer. And just imagine that with kids in the heat trying to make that trip, right? You still didn't have good options after all that. And so you're thinking about like a 2-hour round trip to the grocery store, and that's if it's not crowded. And to go through all that and then still not have fresh vegetables, that just shows the way that these inequities are ingrained in the system. So all that to say, that's why we talk about it as a food apartheid and not a food desert. That's a really important distinction, because the food apartheid language pushes us to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. The Kroger CEO makes $11.7 million a year. I think this year he just got a bonus and a raise. And he has said Black Lives Matter, but when you look at how Black people are actually treated in Kroger as customers and employees, it would negate the idea that Black Lives Matter. And so we look at this from that standpoint, just to make sure that we are taking every action possible to rectify this. So yeah, again, I know that's a lot of information. So what I would like to do, because I know that it's boring to just listen to a person talk for a long time, I would like to do a little scavenger hunt with folks. And I know not everyone is going to come on video. That's totally fine. But what I would like you to do is take the next maybe 15 seconds or so, if you're able, to grab something from your home that you have purchased in the last week from a grocery store. And I want you to drop in the chat what that item is and what store you got it from. So some people shop at Kroger because that's our biggest grocer, but then there are also your local neighborhood marts, there's a supermercado and the international African markets and things like that. So you have about 15 seconds. Grab what you can that you bought from a grocery store. I want you to drop in there what the item is and where you got it from. Bet y'all didn't think you would do cardio today.
So Shauntrice, you said you couldn't see the chat, so I'm gonna just read out what people said or typing in, okay?
All right, perfect.
Okay. So Sarah says pretzels from the Goss Kroger. I said Starbucks coffee from Kroger. I always shop at Kroger. Aldi sometimes, I have to say. Amanda says smoothie, fresh bananas and avocado from Aldi. Frozen fruit and milk, also from Aldi.
Oh, and I can see, I think Justin, you put up coconut oil. Is that what it was? Yes, I actually just got some more Dr. Bronner's. I love Dr. Bronner's products.
And Ryan says dried black beans from Kroger. Bunny says Betty Crocker coconut pecan frosting, 3rd Street Kroger. I would say Shauntrice while people are rummaging around their fridges. I would say I remember the 2nd Street Kroger, and it was instrumental, and for a lot of folks. And I worked on the health science campus, so I would go at the library. So I would go from Belknap. I would stop in that Kroger and then go work at the library. And one thing I really remember is I went in there and I was looking for power bars, like Cliff Bar kind of things, and there was not anything like that, for sure. And they almost laughed at me when I asked if they had Cliff Bars.
That's the wild thing to me. I was born and raised in Louisville. I didn't move away until I went to work in Trinidad in like 2007. I don't think Obama was president yet, so maybe 2006, 2007. So I just moved back to Kentucky last year when I bought my house, and I went to the closest Kroger, which was the Portland one, and I asked for bok choy, and they were like, "Are you like pranking us? Like, what? I've never heard of that." You know what I mean? And it was like, no, it's a thing. Like, and I like pulled up a picture on my phone. They're like, yeah, we got lettuce. And that would just be a repeated thing. I would say like, oh, I'm looking for seaweed snacks. I'm looking for this, that, and the third that I'm used to getting because I used to live in California. I also used to run a vegetarian grocery co-op. So for me, I was like, how do you not have this stuff? Because when I lived here, I was pretty much a kid. And in college, I wasn't shopping responsibly for groceries. I was buying ramen noodles and like eating pizza or whatever was at the sack. So, I never shopped here as an adult. And coming back, it was like, this is wild. I cannot believe how few groceries are available. And I don't, some of you may have already read the Bok Choy project that we did with the Root Cause Research Center, but some of the Kroger locations, they have like the fruit sings to you when you walk in the store. It's like they have the little rain trickling down and it has the storm sounds. Like, I guess that makes the vegetables feel better. Like some of their vegetables are treated better than people, and they just like are having a spa day. Like the cucumbers are just bright and beautiful, and then you walk in the West End Kroger's and it's like those vegetables live in a back alley. Like they've been beat up and are like mugs. Like it looks totally different. So I was like, wow. I just, I'm very privileged to have gone to college. I'm very privileged to have lived out of state and lived out of the country where it's just drastically different, the relationship people are able to have with food. So, coming back, man, it's worse than I thought. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say like I want to destroy Kroger by any means. I don't want to take the one option people have away. I just want to hold them accountable. And there are a lot of businesses that historically have not been held accountable. I've heard Kroger executives say or kind of rationalize the way the West End stores are and say that, the West End stores don't make that much money. They only make money on the first of the month. And that's, when people get government assistance. Some people only get paid once a month. They may have a job, but they're getting paid monthly, or they may get paid bi-weekly every other week or whatever. But like it's a low income area. The Russell neighborhood has a median income of about $20,000, right? So as a corporation, though, you still have a responsibility to treat people who are poor the same way you treat people who are rich. I have a meme that I post all the time, and I've even been on Zooms with the mayor while my screen showed this meme, but it shows like the mayor's salary is 125,000 or so. The median income for the Russell neighborhood where Black Market is located is it fluctuates between like 19 to 21,000. And so that's just to show the disparities, because I guarantee the Kroger that the mayor goes to does not have these same issues. And I just, it's a sad thing, but it's something that can change. And as cynical as I sound a lot of times talking about this, I'm actually very hopeful that we have an opportunity now that people are finally aware, like the average person who's not impacted by it is now aware of these injustices. There are so many opportunities to improve the situation. One thing we always advocate is divesting from the corporations that have bad food practices for Black and low income and folks of color, and invest into our local grocers. We have international markets like the Supermercado, you have the Asian markets, you have African markets, you have some food marts like the Parkland Food Mart here in the West End that is a Black woman runs that, Tammy runs that. You have the, oh goodness, why is it the next door market? Soon you'll have Black Market. We're opening on Black Friday. If COVID allows, come out. And so supporting those grocery stores means you are supporting a family, like you're helping someone to get a computer for NTI. You, by shopping there, are helping someone to pay their rent or their mortgage. It's not going into a corporation where the CEO makes millions of dollars. And so we heavily advocate that people support local movements. And also, a lot of our local grocery stores, like Black markets, source their materials from other local entrepreneurs. We have worked with Black Soil Kentucky, which is a sort of a hub. It's a husband and wife team. Shout out to Ashley if you ever see this. But it's a husband and wife team in Kentucky out of Lexington that is it's a place where you can get access to all the Black farmers. So I can send them an inventory list. Say I need eggs, cheese, milk. I'm going to need ground turkey. I'm going to need this, that, and the third. And they will find all the Black farmers that provide those things and present me with a box of all the things I need at a really affordable price. They also do farm tours to educate people about agriculture in Kentucky. And similarly with our smaller markets, they are sourcing from their neighbors. They may know someone who does a specialty crop out in Danville, like the Miller Farm in Danville supplied our green tomatoes a couple months ago. In Paducah, we have the Phonograph Farm in Reevesville that supplies our organic eggs. And I know I'm shouting a lot of people out because I'm hoping that in the future y'all come on these farm tours with us. They're amazing. But we just, it takes a little bit more effort on the front end, but it makes a huge difference with health. The West End also has, I think, 3 or 4 dialysis centers. The West End has a lot of liquor stores. I don't know if we have more liquor stores or churches, but we have a lot of both. But what we lack is full service grocery stores. So I think that this information is accurate up to, I think, 2017. So in the East End, you have one full service grocer per every 12,000 people. Here in the West End, however, there's one full service grocery for every like 27,000 people. Similarly with banks, we don't have a lot of banks. We don't have a lot of options. I shop at Trader Joe's a lot, one, because they donate to Feed the West. Shout out to Isabella at Trader Joe's. But I also shop there because I know I'm going to get a consistent thing. Like I know I can find what I need there with one trip. Around that Trader Joe's, of course, without going too far, there are maybe 4 or 5 other options. If you go to Kroger here in the West End and you're looking for organic bananas and carrots and things like that, it's hit or miss, honestly. And then if you still need it and you've left the store, I have to drive to New Albany. Usually what I do pre-pandemic. I don't like to go across the bridge these days. But if I couldn't find it at Kroger, I would go across to New Albany to their Kroger. And so that means we're taking money out of Kentucky. We're taking money out of the West End and giving it away. Yes, it's still Kroger, but it's not gonna, those aren't jobs for people here in the West End. And I know a few people who live in the West End and work in New Albany because it is kind of close time-wise, but that's taking money out of our state. So it's something to keep in mind. All right, if there are no chat questions, we're gonna do another activity. I know y'all like, dang, I didn't know I was gonna have to work. So I would love for everyone to just drop in the chat your favorite vegetable. And some of you might not like vegetables, but drop it anyway. And I'm gonna go ahead and say French fries do not count as a vegetable. Some of you have gone to JCPS like me, and that was considered a vegetable, but it does not count for this exercise. And I can see the chat now. Somebody said donuts. All right, so kale, Brussels sprouts, kale, carrot, asparagus, donuts, of course. I feel that in my soul. Green beans, eggplant, zucchini, Brussels sprouts. So yeah, I do this exercise with folks because some of these are not available. So I can name right now, we just went to Kroger yesterday, and there was one bunch of kale that was wilted. There were no Brussels sprouts. I don't think I saw asparagus. I did not see eggplant or zucchini, right? So like some of the vegetables that we love, and this particularly is the Portland Kroger, right? And this is not every day. This is not to say every day they're out of everything, but it's really important to note that when you are grocery shopping, especially if you have children or you have someone you're taking care of who is disabled or someone who's elderly, like you need to make a one trip to the grocery store, maybe once a week or every 2 weeks. And if the stuff is not there, it really puts families at a disadvantage. And we have some families in the West End who regularly shop for their groceries at the dollar store, like Family Dollar, where we know those prices are marked up. They do not have fresh produce. Often the stuff is expired. I know that we had a youth program and our food delivery was late, and the kids really need to be fed. They were acting wild, and so we just went to the Family Dollar and grabbed like all the Lunchables they had, and then we saw that half of them were expired, like once we had already made it back. And that's not, again, to disparage a corporation, it's to hold them accountable. So when we think about what vegetables we grew up on, because again, I was privileged, and also my great grandparents who I grew up with were sharecroppers. They knew how to farm. My grandmother had a garden. So I got to eat a little more fresh than some of my classmates. Like I would pick greens with my grandmother, and a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. And my grandparents were old my whole life, so they were retired from the time I can remember. But some people's grandparents, they're working. They don't have a garden or access to fresh food. So I think it's really important to recognize those things that we have easy access to that other people have no access to. Let me look at my time here. And if somebody from the organizing team can just give me a heads up when I'm like close to time, because I don't want to go over. So the sort of second half of this is more about some like specific food justice initiatives you can be a part of. And so I want everyone right now, because I know we're all on some type of device, to look up the Bok Choy Project. And you can either find it on the Root Cause Research site, Root Cause Research Center site, or you can find it on the Change Tomorrow site. But if you just Google Bok Choy Project and maybe put Feed the West in there, you should get the full project. It's a green and white photo essay. So what I want you all to do is take a moment to kind of skim through that. And what I'm going to have people do in the chat is put down one thing that you noticed from that report. It's not long. It's maybe 7 or 8 pages. And for so y'all are, college students. I'm sure you can handle it. But what I want you to do is kind of skim through that report. Some of you may have already read it, and just put something in the chat that you noticed that was interesting or you have questions about. The work that was done there was between the Food Literacy Project and Feed the West. And we did that report just to show the difference, because a lot of people don't know because they haven't been to the West End. We've had, like I said, hundreds of volunteers at Feed the West, and many of them, even though they were born and raised in Louisville, their first time going to the West End was coming to volunteer with us. And so we can't fault people for not knowing things. But once it's in your face, once you know about the inequities, it's imperative that we act, we do something, and not everyone's going to be out on the streets protesting. That's totally fine. I actually don't like going to protest because I like wearing skirts and ballet shoes, so it's not really protest attire. But we can also do things from our home. We can do things remotely. We definitely see that in COVID right now. But folks can also do things like call these corporations. They can boycott. There's a number of things to be done. So I'm going to give you all a couple moments to just kind of read through that, and drop it in the chat if you're having a hard time finding it, and I'll drop a link. Thank you, Amanda. Oh yeah, and I'll say my apple was brought to you by Trader Joe. Okay, yes, the data hits home and shows obvious disparity on the Bok Choy website. The lesser the Black population, the greater the abundance. Yes. Yeah, and we actually got a little bit of hate mail when we put this out. So you see the pictures, and social media, is really, pictures do really well, right? So I wouldn't just have the whole report, like just type out all the text of the report as a status. That would be ridiculous. But what we did was just show the pictures with a link to the full report. And we got some hate mail in our DMs saying that like we were race baiting, that we were making up the pictures, that I know Taylor, someone cursed at her. Taylor's the executive director, Change Today, Change Tomorrow, saying that she was just like stirring things up, whatever. And so what we responded with was, hey, we actually all went to college. Some of us have master's and doctorate degrees. So we use a research method, and we put the research method in there. We spent weeks with volunteers going to 5 different Kroger locations on the same day, the same time, on their stocking day. So like these were days where they should have had, they were putting their best foot forward. And again, not to pick on Kroger, but they are the only full service grocery here in the West End. And so we did the same method over and over and over. And so we showed pictures from those days, and you'll see on the report in the West End locations, there are some sections that are fully missing. Like the entire section is empty. And even if it was a stocking day after the truck came, because we asked the managers, what day does your truck come? When do you have your like newest vegetables out? And so we did that so that Kroger could put its best foot forward. And in the West End, its best foot forward was empty shelving or wilted vegetables. Some things were just, they had no label at all. And so we saw the disparities week after week after week, and we sent different volunteers just to make sure no one was biased. We didn't doctor up the photos or anything like that. And so, we got a lot of people who were cursing us out about that, saying like, you're making making a big deal out of this. It's not racial, whatever. And so for us, and I see someone put, they had no idea that there was a police presence in the stores. Yeah, like I have never been to a Kroger in the West End where there weren't police. I did a couple lives. I did a couple lives when I was just in the store shopping for myself or shopping for Feed the West, and there were just police. And sometimes like I would talk to the managers, and you can see on some of the lives I'm talking to the staff, with it down, at their feet, because I don't want their face on there if they don't want their face on. But saying like, hey, what happened? Like, did someone call the police? Like, no one called. They just come in here periodically and talk to people, and not talk like, hey, how you doing? But talk like, what's in your pocket? What are you here for? Those sorts of things. And so that is the norm here in the West End. And it is not every single day that someone gets arrested at a Kroger, but it definitely happens way more often because there is a heavy police presence, as opposed to some of your East End locations where police, it would be weird for the police to be there. I think someone said, they had no idea that police officers were in stores, but I'll say that some people in the West End, if they go out to the East End Kroger, they would be confused as to why police aren't there, because it seems like that's just a part of Kroger's corporate structures to have police, if you've only been to West End locations. And I think I see something that says, I can't read the whole comment. Oh, have you looked at all the number of video cameras in stores and what they are focused on? It is so sad to see them in baby formula aisles in some Krogers. Yeah. And unfortunately, yeah, some people steal, but whatever the corporate policy is, it should be across the board. We've all seen, like, no matter where you go in the world, if you see that golden M, that's McDonald's. They all do things a certain way. It's a franchise, right? So they will always have a Big Mac on the menu. They will always have, I don't know if they supersize anymore. I haven't been to McDonald's in a minute, but everyone does the same thing. But with Kroger, even though they are $1 billion corporation, they're part of the billionaire Roundtable, actually. They have different practices in different stores, and just based on our research, based on decades of research, it seems like in the West End locations, which are predominantly Black, they have practices that are more dehumanizing, having like the heavy police presence, the lack of sustainable food options, those sorts of things. So yeah, video cameras would be one of those. And there are disparities that exist in the rest of the store. We focus on the produce section, one, because we're all volunteers and we don't have the capacity to like go aisle by aisle. But one thing we also found out when we reached out to Kroger directly is that less than 1% of the companies they have in their stores are Black owned. There's something called the 15% pledge, which calls on corporations to have at least 15% of your products be Black owned. Kroger has not stepped up to that. They have not indicated that they will. They have brought in a few more Black stores during the uprisings, like many corporations have done. Like suddenly they understand that racism is a thing, and so they're bringing in some Black people. But there's no indication that they're anywhere near that 15%. So it would be great, if we heard from them to say, like, what is your plan? We've suggested a lot of Black farmers to them, but we're not really hopeful that they're going to change. Yes, money, true. Like, in my experience, like if I go to Trader Joe's and they are stocking or they're out of something, it's like, okay, let me fix this problem, right? And Trader Joe, if you've ever been in a Trader Joe's, they have a really dope model. Like they are always in a shopping center, so they don't really need to do advertisement because it's like a high traffic area. The way they have their shelves set up is great. They have like their brand stuff, so like there's no real name brand presence. To me, it's affordably priced. I am privileged to, make a little bit more money than the average neighbor that I have, but it's set up to where they want you to feel good. It's like Chick-fil-A minus the homophobia, so like it's really it's disturbing to see the difference with Kroger. That's a bigger corporation that has more space and potentially more opportunities to create change. And they're not doing those things because Trader Joe's stores are pretty small. But the employees are treated better, the customers are treated better. It's just the environment. Even when COVID hit, they were one of the first companies to like do the COVID safe stuff. Whereas Kroger was, I think, the last grocer in Kentucky to offer that $2 hazard pay. I think it was like a $2 increase temporarily for hazard pay for any essential workers. Kroger was the last company to implement it and the first company to get rid of it. When we still had really high numbers, Kroger took that benefit away from employees, saying that like the threat of COVID was over. Obviously, it's not, because we had our highest numbers this past week. And so again, I know it seems like I'm bullying Kroger, but you can't really bully a corporation. So yeah, that's my little word today. Yeah, so the main thing I want to get across with that is there are a lot of disparities. And unfortunately, for people who don't experience it, they don't realize it's happening. So what I would love to challenge everyone to do, I can't check this, but this would be like your homework. I want you to post on social media. And again, don't post anything you don't believe. Like you can look at my report and, fact check. I encourage you to do that, especially if you're young in your research career, right? You always need to fact check, get multiple sources and legitimate sources, not Wikipedia, not like conspiracytheory.net, whatever, like get some legitimate sources. And I want you to post a screenshot or post a photo of the side-by-side comparison on your social media, not saying that you agree or disagree or whatever, just post it and ask people to also share photos of the Kroger that they shop at or the grocery store that they shop at. I ask folks to do that, and you don't have to tag, Black Market, Feed the West, none of that. I really want to do it as a social experiment to see within your circle, do people even know this is an issue? Are they willing to do anything about it? But more importantly, just to bring awareness. Because as someone mentioned earlier, if you don't live in the West End, what reason would you have to go shop there? So you may just not know. There are some people who live close enough to like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's where maybe they don't even shop at Kroger. They only shop at local markets or farmers markets when it's in season. So I don't fault people for not knowing, but once we know, I do encourage people to take action, and it's really easy. Like I'm in my pajamas from the waist down right now, and I got a whole lot of work done before this call. So it's like we can do a lot with a little, especially with social media. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna pause here to see if folks have questions, comments, or smart remarks, and I'm also gonna eat a little bit because I'm not good at eating breakfast at breakfast time.
Oh, thanks so much, Shauntrice. This has been really fun and honestly like refreshing because we usually get PowerPoints. And so it was great to have the scavenger hunt. And I'm same way with breakfast. So I understand around 11:30, I'm about ready to kill somebody. The hangry is coming on. So I'm just amazed that there's so much data that you have to handle as far as like, oh my goodness, who needs what and where it's coming from. And I mean, is it just you that handles this, or like what is your network and what do people do and how could you use help, especially from students?
Yeah, so some days it is just me. So, like I said, Change Today, Change Tomorrow is the fiscal sponsor of Feed the West. And for the first couple months, I was the director, but also like actually delivering groceries every day. And when I started Feed the West, I actually had two jobs. I was a loan officer and a lobbyist for KFTC, a loan officer for Home, lobbyist for KFTC. But I'm single, so I would tell people all the time, like, that's how I got all this work done. And so when I left Home and only had my KFTC job, I was still doing pretty much all the research, the Bok Choy project. I did the majority of it, and we had volunteers who took the pictures. And so now, though, we have a little bit of a better system and a more sustainable system. We finally have some paid staff at Change Today, Change Tomorrow who are part-time, who help with data. So I kind of lead the research project, set the parameters. Yes, KFTC, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. I love my job. It's the only thing I get paid for. I do not get paid for Black Market or Feed the West. It's for some think I'm making millions. We have we have a person who's working on his PhD at UofL, Jason Deakins. I call him Dr. Jason, even though I don't think he has the whole doctorate yet. But he sort of manages a lot of our research. And thank you, David. He manages a lot of our research. And so I'll say like, hey, it would be really great to have a photo essay. It would be really great to have a side-by-side comparison. And we just kind of have a running document of that. And so sometimes someone will be able to jump in. Sometimes I'll just do the project like in the middle of the night and like put it on Canva and then like sort of peer review it within our group to make sure it makes sense to someone besides me. But maybe like in the summer it was just me doing the research, but now we have folks who are supporting. And we had SNMA from UofL's medical school, which did a lot of the sort of grunt work with the research because, having, first of all, developing your research methods, of course, is really like, a labor of intellectual love. And so we had a lot of components, but now we have it a little more structured. And one way that folks can help for us, honestly, is the more business side of the research. So finding out like what are best practices, where can we get the best prices without using exploitive labor? Because I'm sure I could find a company that, hires children that could give us like really cheap stuff, but we don't want to be a horrible company. So that sort of research, things like helping us with consultations. There's just so many ways to plug in. I think right now I have about 6 interns. And we assign them tasks based on whatever their major is or their interests. And of course, it's always helpful to just have volunteers, like the non-glorious volunteers who just deliver groceries. We are still going to run Feed the West through Black Market. On the days that we're closed, we will just do free grocery delivery. And at the end of every week, whatever we have left, we want to be a zero waste company. And so we will be donating that to people in need who live in the Russell neighborhood, including our employees, because we're hiring 100% from the West End. So those are kind of ways students can plug in, but I'm also open to ideas. Part of the reason we had the recipe cards is not because I came up with it. One of our volunteers at SNMA was like, I delivered groceries and this woman asked if she could give some stuff back because she didn't know what it was, like in terms of the vegetables. And so she came up with the idea of making recipe cards and nutrition guides. And we did a few cooking demonstrations with the vegetables that people were unfamiliar with. And it was really successful. So I'm totally open to ideas that don't require me to use too much brain power. We have a lot of autonomy just because there's not that many of us. So volunteers kind of take ownership of the ideas they come up with. But yeah, and that's also how we got the Trader Joe sponsorship. A volunteer knew someone who worked there and, took it upon herself to take all those steps until the very end. And I think I see hands up. Is that what that means? Or does that mean goodbye?
No, yeah, Justin has a question. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I want you to go into a little bit more depth about something that I think is really important to highlight. The reason I think, Shauntrice, that you've been able to accomplish so much beyond the fact that you're amazing is your ability to collaborate with other existing organizations, right? So why don't you highlight a little bit of that? Like, I'm aware of how Feed the West has collaborated with Louisville Community Grocery.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to the noon Eco Reps workshop. Y'all can join. The link is in the chat about the Louisville Community Grocery, as well as Community Farm Alliance. But talk a little bit about how that ecosystem of organization helps make this work possible.
Yeah, so some of you may have seen, if you've ever worked at a nonprofit, like the kind of like group organization, it's like a hierarchy, right? And so coming from a nonprofit world, in the beginning, I kind of drew one of those, but for food, and it was more of a circle rather than a pyramid. So it was like, when you buy your groceries, what has to happen before you get to the grocery store to make it work, right? You have to have farmers, you have to have a distributor, all these things. And so we looked at like, who do we know that does these things? Of course, like you mentioned, the Louisville Community Grocery Co-op, because I was already one of the owners, like I had bought a share. I said, that's a go-to. I had worked with a farmer through that at Kentucky Greens Co., Mike Jackson, who's a local farmer. Kelsey on the co-op board then connected us with Community Farm Alliance. So we just basically like did a little plug and play with each part that we needed. And then we also asked the community, like, what are the things that you wish were in your neighborhood? Or can you name 3 entrepreneurs who you know personally, like not a corporation? So that's how we ended up getting the people who make our flyers. The Mattel Group is a Black-owned company. A local dad who, he gets my shirts and everything like 2 days. And so with having it be local, of course, it's cheaper and it's like churning money within the community. So for us, like, we almost never do a project without collaboration, just because, number one, we don't have that much capacity. We do a lot, but that's because most of us are single. But we do a lot more because we have so many partners. And there have been like partnerships that like were one time, and then we have some long term, like the Trader Joe partnership was going to be initially every other week for a month. And then it went so well that they started delivering every week. And now they're going to do multiple times a week. And they're trying to get matching, they're trying to get other corporations to match what they do. And they give us enough groceries every Sunday to feed, I think, like 70 of our elders every Sunday. And Trader Joe's, that's where I shop personally. It's good quality food. And they don't give us like their expired stuff or their, stuff that they're going to throw away. They give us like the good stuff, which is amazing. So for us, collaboration is absolutely essential. And when we talk about sustainability, there is no sustainability without collaboration. If I were to try to do this on my own, which in the beginning, because I had to actually fight Taylor a little bit about it the first day, she was like, we do not have time for that. You specifically do not have time for that. And I was like, no, it'll be fine. I'll make the spreadsheet. It'll be fine. It'll be super easy and simple, because I thought it was going to be a 2-day program. I was very wrong. But without that partnership with Change Today, Change Tomorrow, I would not have even been able to accept donations, because I'm an individual. I'm not a 501c3. And some people still donate when it's not a 501c3, but your big dollars from corporations, they want to see a tax write-off. And so that was the first partnership. The second one was with my friend Greg, who runs a center out on Bardstown Road that became our first hub. It's called Breaking Barriers. He does a lot of work, with music therapy with folks who are disabled. He does a lot of really great work. And so, when I had posted, hey, who wants to deliver food with me tomorrow? He was like, well, my place is shut down for COVID and it's sanitized. You can have it while you're running this program. And for the first couple months, that was our main hub. And we got, I think $500,000 worth of groceries within a month. And we would not have been able to accept those groceries without him. Because at the time I was like moving into a new house, because I was like, oh, maybe I can store it at my place, which wouldn't have been sanitary. So it's like, we could not have had this program without those folks. And I think it allowed other people to build their own way they could collaborate. Nori Bar has worked with us. Just all these people I never would have thought would reach out. They have reached out, like via DM, text, like every way possible to communicate. Folks have reached out. And I think each collaboration improves our visibility, but it also is a call to action for other potential partners. Boys and Girls Club has been wonderful. They were our first major pickup center. And we served hundreds of people there each day back when we were using them as a hub. So it's just like, I know that this is not like a Shauntrice is great thing. This is a community is great thing, because like the ideas that our partners come up with when we do have our like risk assessment and all these meetings is like, they have brilliant ideas, but they've just never had the chance to like show the world these ideas. And I've been very blessed to have that opportunity. And I think I'm weird enough on social media that people pay attention before this. So once this happened, people were like, oh yeah, she's not just posting Rihanna memes. Cool. And it's been amazing to see just that, like, a lot of people have this belief that, like, especially in the nonprofit world, like, I got to get it first. I can't share this grant information with anyone else. Like, it's all a secret. I got to be the first one to get there. But we've had the opposite strategies, like tell everybody about everything, as you see on our social media. And it helps us to be more sustainable. So thank you for bringing that up, Justin. That's been a major part of our success so far, is just the collaboration, and with like unlikely partners too. Anybody who says they want to partner, we'll check them out and vet them a little bit, but we're pretty much like, yeah, let's do it. And if it doesn't work out, one thing we try not to do is we don't say like that's a bad partnership for everyone. And so yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. I'm like surprised every day when someone reaches out like, oh, I live in Frankfurt and I heard you do a food thing. We're coming in and we would love to bring you a truck of groceries. I'm like, cool. So yeah, collaborations are absolutely essential in this work. And
Okay.
I think Sean has.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be our last question. Sorry, I feel like we could go on for a while. Sean, you still have a question?
I'll just, yeah, so first off, inspiring, wonderful work. No, I'm kind of, last question. Have you considered or looked at partnering and encouraging local community gardens and community garden projects to help contribute to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so it's a little difficult with community gardens because they don't have enough crop space. Like a lot of the West End community gardens are very small and they grow like every plot has like a different thing. But what we're looking at, I just met with the US 2 weeks ago maybe, is doing specialty crop grants. So I've been buying up some property and helping other people buy like the vacant lots in the West End from the land bank to turn those into crops. So like 1/2 acre would be just sweet potatoes, one would be just garlic. So yeah, we're definitely looking into that and seeing what the rules are, but also to like, I want people in Louisville to consider farming as like a legitimate thing to do, like a go-to. Personally, I'm looking, hopefully by this time next year, I will be a farmer. Like I will have farmed and like have crops that I'm growing. Because it is, number one, it's great for mental health. Like every day now I'm getting up and pruning, I'm checking the garden, I'm like picking weeds and all that. And it's like, it's therapeutic, especially in this time where we're all isolated. But then also we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, like people couldn't get access to food at all. But if we had on the block 3 different farmers with their small crops, you're trading vegetables. If one person's crop is screwed up because of weather or whatever else, like you're able to help other families. So I'm really trying to push for people to take that seriously. I think when we've been doing these farm field trips, people are like, what? Because I'm inviting random people in my network and they're like, why would I go to Paducah? And I'm like, I've never been to Paducah either. And I actually don't know what we're going to see when we go there. And I know it's 3.5 hours, but like, just come on. And they did. Like, we've been to a few farms now, and people, when they get there, like, okay, I get it. Like, we saw a farm that's been in this family for like 3 generations. They have like 200 acres of land. And literally, I had never been able to visualize 200 acres. Like, I just couldn't picture it in my mind until I went. I was like, literally, as far as you can see, that's all their land and that's all crops. So I definitely want to have those community farms involved. I have to catch up and do some more learning about like, what defines a community farm, what defines a farmer. And I have some work to do to make sure that when I present it, it's something sustainable, because I would hate to have something that sounds great and then it fails because I haven't put in the structure. So that's definitely on the front of my mind with this.
Great. I would also suggest you look up the Yard Yum project, where
say it one more time. The Yard
Yum. They do they essentially rent homeowners' lawns and turn them into garden spaces.
Oh, wow.
And the homeowner either gets money from the sale of the food, or they get some of the food from the garden.
One thing about me, I'm looking up that now.
It could be a tax write-off for them too, honestly.
I'm already on their site.
Yeah, that could actually be a tax write-off for the homeowner too, because they have a farm. To be a farm, you don't have to be a certain size acreage. You could have, a greenhouse and be considered a farm for your taxes and not have to do a LLC either. There you go. Oh my goodness. Well, is it okay, Shauntrice, if I put your email in the chat for people to contact you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
feedthewest@change-today.org. Happy to answer any questions. Again, I'm not an expert, but I pretty much try anything. So yeah, totally happy to be in conversation with folks about that.
Well, and certainly I have master's students, many are on the seminar, or we'll see it later because they're working, but sounds like there's a lot of great potential for thesis or capstone projects. It's something they need to do for their degree anyway, and we have many, many students that are interested in food issues in our community. So please, reach out to me and I'll reach out to you.
Bye, Shaun.
There's a lot of collaboration that we could do, and be mutualistic about it. Oh goodness, this was such a great seminar. I'm sorry we have to stop. Maybe we need you again in the spring for an update, but I know you're busy too. So please do communicate with Shauntrice, folks, if you want to get involved, help out in any capacity, and we'll definitely keep the conversation going between us and all the other faculty and staff at UofL.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it. This was not stressful like many of them.
Oh, this is so much fun. Yeah. All righty. Well, I guess y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy this little bit less of sun we're going to get, because it's going to rain for days. Soak it in.
Thanks.